Welcome to another episode of Let Go and Lead, where we discuss the new realities of leadership with pioneers, provocateurs, and passionate leadership champions. My guest today is Ann Powell, who's the Executive Vice President and Chief Human Resource Officer at Bristol Myers Squibb. Ann's responsible for driving talent management, culture, and organizational effectiveness across the company globally. She's also held leadership positions at Shire and Wyeth Pharmaceuticals, as well as Dow Chemical. I'm excited to speak with Ann today about her experiences leading change and transformation across some of the most complex organizations in the world, and the lessons she's learned from working across continents and across different business cultures over her career. So get comfortable and get ready to let go and lead. Ann, welcome to the Let Go and Lead podcast. I'm so thrilled to have you here.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me, Maril.
Absolutely. You've had such an amazing career. I mean, you've spanned both international and domestic positions. It's some of the world's largest and most admired companies. I mean, I know right now for the last 10 years, you've been the executive vice president and chief human resource officer at Bristol Myers Squibb, but you've also served at many major pharmaceutical companies, both Shire and Wyeth, as well as Dow Chemical.
Yes, it's been a fun career, I'll say that.
We'll talk more about it as we get going because I know our listeners will really be interested. In your role at BMS, you're responsible for driving the company's global capabilities in talent management, culture, organizational effectiveness. So you've got quite a broad remit. What I thought was really interesting is that you didn't actually start your career intending to go into human resources. Tell us a little bit about that.
I'll start by saying it's incredible how one action and one conversation can directionally impact an entire life and career, and that's kind of my story. Let me just say I'm one of three daughters to parents who are fourth generation farmers. So I grew up on a cattle ranch in Iowa. That's my background, right? And my older sister, Chris, she's one of those kids that I think Meryl, before she could speak, before she could walk, she knew she wanted to be a veterinarian and to treat horses. And that's exactly what she did. So here I come. I'm the middle child, right? And I'm following the oldest child who knows exactly, has her whole life mapped out. And I didn't have a clue, Meryl. I had no idea what I wanted to do, but I felt pressure, like I should know what I want to do. So, and I wanted to, the one thing I knew I wanted to do was make my parents proud. So I decided to go into pre med. Now, the problem with that decision, and I stuck with it for 3 years, was I wasn't particularly good at it. I didn't enjoy the classes. Frankly, I am the person you don't want around when there's blood. I'm going to pass out, I'm going to faint, and you're on your own. So you don't want me anywhere near. So there were a lot of things wrong with this picture. So one day I was at my third year at university, right? And I happened to sign up and take a labor economics course. It was an elective credit, didn't, it was elective. So it went towards something. And it really piqued my interest. And I can say for the first time, I was like, I really like the content of this. So I went to my college advisor. We all had college advisors that were assigned to us. And I said, what can I do with an economics degree? Long story short, he told me about this, at the time, a new field, labor and industrial relations, it was called at the time, where they had advanced degree programs. There were three of them at the time that were prevalent in the United States. I chose the University of Minnesota to pursue my master's degree, and the rest is history. So, I'd like to tell you that I went into pre-med because of a desire to help patients. At that stage and age in my life, I just wanted to make my parents proud.
Well, making your parents proud is not a bad thing, right? We all want to make our parents proud. Yeah, that's great. But what really intrigued you about the labor economics?
There was something about um, the labor and the people component. There was something about how work is powered by workforces and people. And at the very basic level, how, the whole supply and demand, that if that equation isn't right, work doesn't get done. And I think I was parlaying that with some early psychology, industrial psychology courses that I was going through. And that got me excited because I thought the power of people really drives everything in an economy. And if you don't have that, then there is no economy. There really isn't a future. And so that was the aspect I think that piqued my interest. I have seen so many changes over the years since I first went into this field. I've lived through the evolution of HR being an administrative function. And when I say an administrative function, highly transactional, known for processing of recognition programs, processing payroll, being the policy police. I remember, that era of HR to where it's at right now, which is a strategic business function, business leaders wearing a hat of expertise around people and organization change and organization design. That's where it's at today. There's a much greater appreciation for the impact that this profession can have on business results, that this profession can have with investors, with shareholders, certainly with our workforce, which we just spoke about. The company's reputation touches the work that we do, and certainly in our case at Bristol Myers Squibb, the case for patients, because that's our mission. That's what we're about. Um, I'll say that the people behind our medicines, our workforce, are the heart and soul of Bristol Myers Squibb, and I have the distinct privilege, and I do not take it for granted, of ensuring that that workforce has a working environment that helps them do their best work.
Yeah, and in full transparency to our viewers, Gig and McDonald's worked with BMS on many initiatives since 2016, so I've had a chance to see you in action. And I do have to say that you really live and breathe the people are our greatest asset. What are some of the things that you think are the biggest challenges in that?
Well, I think, what's behind some of the changes that we've seen, as this profession has evolved is, we've seen more business-minded HR leaders come into play over the years, and this has helped to connect the business outcomes to culture, to workforce engagement, and something I hope we can talk about later, workforce wellness, which is super
Absolutely.
important, and I think the next kind of realm of what's coming towards us. I think the use of metrics, all the research and science that is out there now, whereas in the beginning of my career we didn't have that much research in this space. We certainly didn't pull from it as much. And I think having that data to make the connections and demonstrate value to the investments that are being made in the HR space has helped as well. Speaking the language of the business, when I say we're business leaders first, I think you have to be exceptional at storytelling to bring the impact to life and get the attention of leaders who, these are leaders now who have increasingly high workloads right now and high expectations for driving even greater results. And so to be able to translate how what I do, what we do, helps them achieve those outcomes is important. And that's where the storytelling skill comes into play. And then obviously we all know that high performance is just not obtainable without strong leadership in a highly engaged in a driven workforce. And whether you like it or not, because we have worked with you for many years, how strong the mission is at this company around alignment to the work that we do and delivering medicines for patients. So having the workforce aligned around that is really key to driving the results, um, and quite frankly the engagement of the workforce. It's a powerful mission.
It's interesting you just talked about research and data. How have you really gotten your team more focused around that? Because as you mentioned, that wasn't an area that HR focused on a lot in the past, or maybe comp and benefits, it did, but less around behavioral data, correct?
It was an evolution. So I didn't certainly come into this role having all the right answers, but as I moved from role and from company, I I am very observant and I watch and learn from those who have more experience or who I just like the way they work and they think. And I learned from them, but I adapted it to my own style. So early on in my career, I'm sure I was a role model for HR speak HR theory, probably wasn't as impactful as I could have been. But when I watched those individuals that I worked with that did it well, I learned that they were talking the language of the business and they really understood the business as a driver because that gets attention when you can do that. And then I saw them use data and ask questions around or follow up and say, last year you gave us this sum of money, and I want you to know this is what we did with it. And it failed. And so this is what we're doing with this money this year to show a stronger return on investment. Or they would quote, a real big impact for me, Meryl, was they would quote external um, journals or studies with some audiences. In other audiences, that doesn't work. Or they would say, I was talking to a buddy in fast moving consumer goods, and in that industry, they approach this problem this way. And I would see people lean forward in their seats. And I was like, there's something there to be externally focused and constantly monitoring what's going on outside of this industry to be able to bring those insights in. And the insights, it's not a plug and play ever. Even within our industry, it's not a plug and play
Right.
on solutions, but innovation can come from so many places. And the data piece was a way for me to be heard with business leaders, which when you look at my career path, we're largely engineers, scientists, doctors, folks who really were driven and had an interest in data.
And it seems like you really pretty quickly caught on to how do you use the data plus tell the story. You talked about storytelling, and some of the examples you just gave were sort of a mix of both.
Yes. I am a proponent of if there was one tool that I could have in my leadership toolkit, it would be the gift and the art of storytelling. And I'm still perfecting it and still working on it. But I think storytelling is so very powerful in remembering what an individual said. I oftentimes, how many times have you been at a forum and someone accepts an award and someone goes behind the podium and gives a long speech and thanks a bunch of people. Oftentimes, 20 minutes later, I can't remember who won the award. But if the person who stood behind the podium ties it into a story, I can remember that story for a long, long time, who the person was. And so that is, I don't think I'm unique in that I remember stories better than I remember presentations.
Yeah, it's interesting. I had the opportunity to interview Mitch Albom, of course, one of the greatest storytellers there is. And what do you think makes a great storyteller?
Honestly, empathy and authenticity. I would probably lead with authenticity. The stories have to be your own. And I use the word empathy because they need to be heartfelt. You need to have lived those stories. And the piece that is the skill to storytelling is anybody can recall a story or event in your life, but you need to connect it to the point you're trying to make, the business point that you're trying to make to pull that through. Otherwise, it's a good story with no relevance. And a lot of times, as I'm coaching and helping folks, it's that, okay, now's the time to make that business link or connection and make sure that the point you're trying to pull through is pulled through your story at the front end, but also at the back end and tie that bow.
How do you help people become better storytellers?
Well, it starts with practicing. You can't be a good storyteller if you just practice at home in front of the mirror. It's kinda like speaking, right? I gave great speeches in front of my dog earlier in life, but until
Yeah.
you're on that stage and until you see yourself, you don't how you rehearse isn't always how it comes out when you're on the stage and actually doing it. So it's practice and like so
Yeah.
many other things with leadership, you just have to start. And when you start, you'll do some things right. And you know what? You'll do some things that you wish you would have tweaked. But if you didn't start and you tried to make it perfect and perfect and perfect, you're not going to evolve and you're not going to progress in your storytelling journey or in your leadership journey. And I think sometimes we just want it to be so perfect that we don't take the risks and get out there and just get started on the journey. You got to take the first step.
I'd love to just also pick your brain on your experience internationally because, you've lived abroad. You were in Germany and Switzerland. I think that was with Dow Chemical. Is that right?
It was, yes.
What did you bring back with you to the US from a international perspective?
There's so much I brought back that would take the rest of this time, but I can give you 2 examples. I'll start with I'm really grateful for the Dow Chemical Company and the investment they made in my development, so early in my career. I'm just forever blessed and grateful I had that opportunity. My learnings were many and significant, but I'll pick 2 that I'll share with you. Um, First of all, I moved my first international assignment was in Leipzig, Germany. It was shortly after the wall came down in Germany. And I viewed everything I saw and heard through my own US and through my own personal filter. And I made judgments on that filter, which were frankly inaccurate and false. So, for example, the first time I was in Leipzig, we had just moved there. I was in the grocery store and I was frantically looking for anything that resembled frosting. I would have even um, settled for whipped cream, just anything to put on my daughter's birthday cake, who was celebrating her 4th birthday. And I wanted it to be special. And I was running all over this little grocery store and nobody would help me. All right. So, I casually mentioned it the next day at work to a German work colleague, and I can tell you through my own filter, I was like, "Wow, Germans are not very friendly. They're not very helpful. This is gonna be quite the experience." So the next day at work, I just casually mentioned it over coffee to a colleague, and he asked me if I had asked someone for help. And I said, well, no, but it was obvious, Peter. I was running all over this store." And he shared that if I would have asked, many people would have come to my assistance, but it was considered rude and it was considered intrusive in their culture if they were not asked. And that was a major, major reset for me. And I felt embarrassed that I was passing my own judgment of not helpful, not very friendly. There's not anything further from the truth. But it was just a change in culture that I had never experienced before. So it was a reset for me, Meryl, because I realized whenever I go into a situation where I don't have clarity, like I try to leave my own filters at the door because I know how false and inaccurate many times they can be based on the experiences that I've had. My second example is around language. Language was a barrier for me in those, international assignments. I was taking German language courses through Berlitz, but I wasn't very good, and there was really very little English at the time spoken, where I was living, and that was really humbling. I felt like I really, for the first time, really felt like an outsider, and it didn't feel good. Um, as a result, I did everything that I could, Meryl, to fit in. I changed my wardrobe, my clothing style. I dressed in all black because a lot that was kind of what I looked around and saw others doing. I intentionally didn't speak on public transportation, um, unless I had to. I was trying to hide my accent, and clearly, when I spoke German, you could tell that it wasn't my native language. But I was still different. I still had American features. You can't hide that. You can't change your makeup and hide, the features that I had. And so this experience really was foundational in helping me appreciate how others who don't fit in must feel. And the experience really helped shape my leadership style and approach to shaping culture through an inclusion lens because I personally felt it, and that was a difficult time for me.
How do you think it has impacted your leadership style? Because now, of course, you're in a global company headquartered in the US, and you have many, many colleagues elsewhere in the world.
I'm a better listener. I listen more and speak less because I realize, on most topics outside of my own culture, I'm not the expert. And the way I can help those individuals, those leaders, those workforces in the various countries that we have all over the world is to really listen and really understand what the concerns are, what the needs are, and how work gets done differently in those organizations. There is not a one size fits all global model, cookie cutter approach that you can stamp country by country. And I think that experience helped me appreciate that, these individuals with different perspectives coming from different countries, it wasn't that they were just um, rejecting the corporate way or the one size fits all. They had legitimate issues and concerns and needed to be heard. And that ability to just sit back and listen and ask clarifying questions, talk less, has served me well.
I know you often talk about a radically inclusive culture, not just an inclusive culture, a radically. Talk more about that and what you mean by that.
So you're going to hear me get more excited now. Our BMS mission is to bring innovative medicines to patients who can't wait. They're dealing with serious disease. And that mission is underpinned by a vibrant culture that embraces diversity of thought, which in turn drives greater innovation. So, radical inclusion is a mindset and it's an accelerator, quite frankly, to drive innovation, which is necessary to deliver these breakthrough medicines to patients. It's ensuring that we're creating a work environment that not only enables, but it encourages different ideas, different thoughts, different opinions, different perspectives, and therefore it's going to generate different solutions. Every single person's opinion matters here. It's personal to us. We're doing something big. Our industry, our company is doing something really big here. Healthcare, obviously, it needs to work for everyone, and we're only successful if the medicines that we're resourcing and producing reaches every single patient that needs them. So, what motivates us collectively as a team and frankly personally, for me, is the impact we're going to have on patients. That's why having a radically inclusive culture is important. It's a business imperative. It's not a nice to do. It's not an HR program. It's not an HR initiative. It's owned by every single individual at BMS.
It's one thing to passionately want it. It's another thing to achieve it. What are some of the things you're doing to really drive that mindset?
Oh my gosh, we've been at this for so many years. BMS has 6 values. One of those values is inclusion. So that tells you how dominant that is in guiding how we do our work. I'll start with, I think BMS has a superpower. Many companies have this superpower, but our superpower are what we call our people and business resource groups. Other organizations call them employee resource groups, but we have 8 of these people and business resource groups at BMS. Most of them started over 20 years ago, so this is not new work for us. And they have continuously pushed BMS to think bigger. About just under 50% of the BMS workforce belongs. These are optional, groups. About just under 50% of our workforce belongs to these people and business resource groups. So, how have they helped us embed inclusion into what we do is kind of your question. They have helped advance this value, um, and really linked inclusion to needs that exist within the business to help drive our strategy. So, for example, one of our people and business resource groups is our Black organization for leadership development. And they recognized years ago the need for more diversity in clinical trials. And they brought forward to our research and development organization and said, we're not getting patients that look like us into the clinical trials because there aren't physicians running these clinical trials that look like us, and we need to change this because different diseases impact different groups differently, and we need to research that and know the impact of our patients. We have since activated just under 60% in our US clinical trials in diverse communities, and it was that bold people and business resource group that helped us identify, if we're going to change this dynamic, where do we need to be running these clinical trials? How do we get into these communities and break through? There was also a pilot that was done with prostate cancer. Um, you may or may not know the incident rate for prostate cancer is about 60% higher in Black men than in
Right.
white men. And so the average clinical trial that was being run across our entire industry for prostate cancer enrolled about 4% Black patients. Through working with our bold people and business resource group, we were able to drive participation in this particular clinical trial up to enrollment closer to 18%. Now, we're still not where we need to be, but I'm trying to give you an example of how
Right.
these people and business resource groups are pulling inclusion through to deliver on our people strategy. We have a group called Peer that we engage. These are expert patient advocates that give voice and work with us to help us identify what are the clinical protocols that we need to incorporate into our clinical trials very early on that will address their various diverse needs to make it easier for them to participate in. Just another example, our Dawn, which is our disability people and business resource group, is working right now with us on how do we improve access for individuals with disabilities in our clinical trials, because that community has a different set of needs that's currently not being
Yeah.
addressed. So these, when I call these people and business resource groups our superpowers, they are, you know thousands and thousands of our employees that belong to these groups sit all over the world, participate in these forums from markets all over the world, and help us to connect inclusion to um, driving business results. On the people side, some of the things we do, we've integrated inclusive practices across all of our talent processes. So when I say that, we require diverse candidate slates for roles that we're filling. We require diverse interview panels. Again, we try not to do one-on-one interviews. We do panel interviews and make sure our interview panels are diverse. It's a better experience for our candidate, but also when you ask a question and four people hear the answer, you hear different things. And
Yeah.
so afterwards, we're able to compare perspectives, opinions, share. I heard that differently. I didn't hear that as arrogance. I heard it as this. And we're finding not only are we more efficient with how we're recruiting individuals, but we're able to pull through more diversity of individuals with diverse interview panels. So I'll stop there, but I could go on and on and on
Yeah.
because there's many, many years of work behind driving this inclusionary culture.
What I've seen with the work that you've done is it's been very intentional in terms of changing the processes and the systems, because even the example of the employee resource groups, they're the people in business groups. A lot of companies have groups such as that that bring forth ideas, but the ideas never go anywhere. So you've actually created that whole system that enables taking the new ideas and the diverse ideas and putting them into action.
I like to say you're exactly right. I like to say we've done a couple things differently with our people and business resource groups. First of all, if you take just under 50% of our workforce belongs to them, I like to say they are the strongest and biggest business unit we have. That in turn gets some
Oh
some
yeah,
attention there. So they've got
yeah,
voice. The second thing we did, Merrill, is we used to years ago, it was a part-time kind of, the individual running the people and business resource group did it in addition to their day job. There was never enough time. And we said, if this is really important to us, and it is, and a company value, these are going to be full time roles. And we're going to pull the best and the brightest out of the business, have them rotate through these roles, build their skills and develop them because they now have a global platform. They are on
yeah,
global stages and have a reach beyond most of them any job they had prior to that. And then we move them back into the business. And the third thing is their budget and what they get each year is dependent upon, there's an ROI expected there. So those that are delivering results and showing ROI with the budget that they're given are given more budget the next year. Those who aren't, it's kind of like that's the skill of running a business. They kind of have their own
yeah.
P&L, and that's a skill set that comes from running a people and business resource group as well. And it is a mouthful to say. It took me years to be able to roll off PBRG.
The other thing I'd love to talk to you about is that BMS has gone through so much change and transformation over the last several years. You've had a lot of mergers and acquisitions and divestitures. You've done a lot of organizational restructuring. And how do you maintain your culture through all of that?
it's a big part of how we do that work. So I'd almost flip it and say it's our culture which enables us to continue to manage through all of the changes that you referenced. I know actually that healthy, growing, successful companies continuously change and transform, right? And you want this
Yeah.
to happen, and you want to belong to a company that's continuing to transform itself, because if you're not, it's probably not going to be a successful company or perhaps a successful journey for you. So change is good. It can feel scary at times, but when you're feeling trapped by change, step back and acknowledge that it's actually most change is very positive. A strong and an inclusive culture enhances our ability to integrate and make these changes more quickly. We align around our purpose and our mission. We are very clear on what we're all here and what we do when we come to work every day. It's about our patients, and we measure our engagement with regards to how are we doing with this culture, especially as we bring in new companies and do integrations that way. We measure that through engagement surveys. We have pulse surveys that we're constantly doing, which, they're kind of like temperature gauges, and they kind of help us know where there are hot spots, where there are cold spots. And that helps us also to pivot actions and be more flexible on where we need to drive change. So if we see a gap in a particular market, we will intentionally, I use that word intentionally, we will intentionally go into that market and start to understand, listen for understanding what are some of the dynamics that are causing some of those gaps. Or if we have a particular site in the United States, we do the same thing, and we're able to show how our interventions then help to close those gaps that exist. But you can't be everywhere and everything to everyone. So we rely heavily on our general managers and our leadership to drive that. And like I said, we're very intentional about our actions and where we go in as an HR team and try to drive greater impact.
I know one of the things that's very important to your culture is wellness, and in fact, you're the executive sponsor of your Living Life Better program. What matters to you in terms of wellness?
I have so much to say on this one. Our living life better for us, it's a mindset. And it's a mindset for driving well-being rather than a discrete program, because well-being is an ongoing journey that's driven by so many variables in our life, well beyond just work, right? Our living life better is really focused on. Um, we were intentional about this, all aspects of well-being. So when I say that, we focus on the physical piece, which is nutrition, exercise, sleep. We focus on financial aspects. Are you, how do you plan ahead? Are you saving? What is your spending like? So we offer support and resources that way. The third area is emotional, managing stress, bouncing back, resilience, mindfulness, mental health, all of that sits under emotional. And then the last one is the whole balance of work life, career. What's your purpose? How do you give back to your community? Social, environmental, the ESG stuff kind of sits in there. So we recognized years ago, even prior to the pandemic, Meryl, that there was a need and a value to the company. While we can't control everything that goes on outside the walls of the company, we recognize that as individuals, we are bringing that to work, whether the company wants to recognize it or not. We're bringing that to work, and it's impacting how we do our jobs, our distraction level, and whatnot. So we invested years ago on this path, saying that it's a place where we should play because does impact our workforce. And we build a holistic strategy around this that we try to ground through science. Our goal is to make sure that we have opportunities to support individuals in their own individual way that they need that support and the guidance. And I personally believe, this is my personal belief, but I've been pretty vocal about it here, that this is a competitive advantage for organizations. Um, and that well-being for the workforce is going to be a primary driver that will differentiate organizations in the long term and their success. We know right now 1 in 4 individuals globally are impacted by mental health issues, and companies that are just sitting back, or quite frankly, I'll say sitting back or just providing resources, when you get in there again and you listen to what folks are looking for, There's a lot of resources out there already, and BMS has a whole library of resources we provide, don't get me wrong. But what folks really want is they want an opportunity, a safe environment to express what they're going through, how it's impacting them. They don't want to be judged by that. And most of all, they're seeking to find a community or individuals in the work environment that might also be going through that issue and can share learning, support, or connections to resources. And so we've tried to move away from it just being a category of resources to go tap because most folks just want the sort of safe environment to be able to articulate what's going on in their life and not being judged as not committed to work or distracted or, all of the baggage that comes with that. And that touches inclusion again, which is why I'm just such an advocate of that being part of our culture. We invest over $3 million in this space currently. We're very serious
Hmm.
about this. But as important as that financial piece, Meryl, what's important is that our actions and our behaviors, what we're saying about this, that they match. We really want to role model what the words that we're using and show that. So what does that look like? Um, when we have global town hall, for example, last month, this is a good example. It's June now. So last month, May, we had a global town hall. We have all of our colleagues all over the world. There's only so many topics you can squeeze into a town hall and leave ample time for questions at the end. One of the topics we spoke about was wellness, mental health. Our CEO stands on the stage and he talks about the importance of take your vacation, take your time off. Don't feel compelled to, respond to emails when you're out. Let your body recharge. We walk the talk on that. It's not just a script that we think is popular to say or trending externally. We truly believe it.
And I've noticed you focus not only on your workforce, but some of your partner organizations. Like I remember when we did the work together to do the resiliency workshop for a lot of healthcare partners. I mean,
Yes.
I think BMS is really taking a lead in helping everybody.
We have a cancer support network that helps both employees because we're patients too.
Yeah.
Caregivers, many of us are caregivers for cancer patients. We have many external organizations that we partner with. We're piloting something right now. I'd love to speak about. We have about 400 individuals from all over the company who have been trained to be mental health allies. And what that means is they sit all over the world in different markets and they are known to individuals in that market to be essentially what I call them mental health allies. So if you're struggling with something and you don't know where to go or where to start, you can seek out one of these individuals that's been trained up and seek their counsel and seek their support. They're supposed to be a safe resource. We're just starting to experiment with this, but of those who are participating in the program right now, we've seen a 33% increase in the workforce is feeling safe and comfortable to talk about mental health in the workforce. We saw an 18% increase of individuals that believe that BMS supports good mental health in the workplace. So I don't know that we're far enough along to say it's a grand slam, but we're seeing enough traction here that we're going to continue to explore this program and see if there's something there that might be applicable more broadly.
That sounds fantastic. And it's interesting because you're always trying new things, right? You're not afraid to just try, pilot. It works, it doesn't work, you move on.
We're trying to be better at
Yeah,
that. I try to really role model that, and I talk about, return on investment because I say we're not researching or discovering new medicine. I'm talking about the HR function
yeah.
now. We support all of that work and it's really important work, but I always say, that we are given a nice budget to work with and we have a responsibility and accountability to make sure that the return on investment for patients and for the company is there because for every dollar we're spending, that could be a dollar that could go into a clinical trial or a research study. So we're very cognizant of that again, because the mission is so strong in this company to make sure we're being wise with how we're spending our dollars and the impact that that's having.
So I'm going to ask you one more question. And that is, as you know, this podcast is called Let Go and Lead. And it's all about how one leads when one recognizes you're not really in control.
Yep.
What do you think leaders most need to let go of?
This one's easy for me. Stop letting others' expectation of what a leader is and isn't define who you are as a leader. And when I say others, I'm talking about media, I'm talking about research, I'm talking about others' opinions, I'm talking about your own narrative that runs in your head. I mentioned before I grew up on a farm in rural Iowa. We grew our food in the garden. We had a massive garden. That's where we grew our food. We rarely went to a restaurant. That was a real treat. When I was a kid, I went to a state college. I went there on scholarships and loans. Um, I lived a pretty basic existence growing up. And then I went to college and I kind of felt like I was thrown into a completely different life, like completely foreign to me. And I did not share or talk about my upbringing, really who I was for many, many years. And the reason I didn't do that is on me. I take full accountability for this. I didn't want others to think I wasn't well educated. I didn't want others to think maybe I wasn't intelligent or I didn't have enough money or I wasn't cultured. And I did everything that I could, Meryl, to fit in to what I thought good looked like. And sadly, I spent a good percent of my career being that individual. And then I went through an unexpected divorce. All right. And I decided that it was time to find Anne again. And I did a conscious, intentional reset. It took that for me to really slow down and try to find myself. I dropped the formality. I stopped trying to be perfect. I grew my hair. Started to share stories, including growing up on a farm. Everybody at BMS knows I'm a farm girl. I've told so
Yep.
many stories about that. I share my failures. I relaxed and I became my authentic self. And I also believe that in doing that, I became a better leader. People started to relate to me even more. So my advice is to be yourself. Try some new things on. If they don't work, throw them out and try something else on. And in time, you will find your own unique to you, authentic version of leadership, and it will be terrific.
That's an incredible story and a wonderful way to close. Thank you so much for your time. I have so many more questions, but I don't want to keep you longer than I promised.
Thank you for having me again. I truly enjoyed the opportunity to talk with you today.
That was such an enjoyable conversation with Anne. One thing that stood out to me is that she said that if she had only one tool in her leadership toolkit, it'd be the art of storytelling. She said that good storytellers bring honesty, empathy, and authenticity to their stories, and they know when and how to clearly connect the business point they're trying to demonstrate. She said the truly great storytellers continuously refine their craft, constantly looking for opportunities to tell their story and gauge the reaction they're making. I thought Anne's point about the need to practice was an important takeaway. She also spoke passionately about BMS's culture of radical inclusion, which she said embraces diversity of thought, which in turn drives greater innovation and ultimately helps the organization achieve its business mission. She said that radical inclusion is genuinely owned by every single person who works there, which obviously makes it a key part of their culture. I also found it interesting that she said they don't focus on maintaining the culture through periods of transformation, but that in fact the company's strong and inclusive culture is what enables them to continuously transform and make changes more quickly. I was also impressed by BMS's commitment to the well-being of their workforce through Living Life Better, which Anne said is a holistic, science-based strategy that looks at all aspects of well-being, including physical aspects such as nutrition, exercise, and sleep, financial components like planning ahead, saving, and spending habits, emotional aspects like managing stress, resilience, mindfulness, and mental health, and work-life balance elements such as purpose, community, social, and environmental. It's clear that their commitment to living life better is making a real difference in their workforce around the globe. I especially loved Anne's response to my question about what we need to let go of to be better leaders. She said we need to stop letting other people's expectations of what a leader is define who we are as leaders. She said we should just be ourselves, and we should keep trying new things, and in time, we'll find our own authentic version of leadership. I think that's great advice for all of us. I hope you find inspiration for your own leadership journey from this conversation with Anne. I know I did. Don't forget to subscribe to Let Go and Lead so you won't miss conversations with other pioneers, provocateurs, and passionate leadership champions, including Amy Edmondson, Sally Jenkins, Mark Crowley, and Veda Manager. Thanks for joining us, and see you on the next episode of Let Go and Lead.